Howdy y'all, my name is Dave. This is the Anime Field Guide podcast, and you are listening to The Studio Rundown. This is my series where I take you through the history and major milestones of anime production houses across Japan. Today's featured episode is Studio Sunrise, also Bandai Namco Filmworks. Sunrise was founded in 1972 by 7 former producers of Mushi Productions' production and sales department, so this was Osamu Tezuka's main studio. And these producers are Yoshinori Kishimoto, Masanori Ito, Eiji Yamamoto, Yasuo Shibue, Masami Iwasaki, Kiyomi Numamoto, and Yasuhiko Yoneyama. Specifically, they established Sunrise with the management policy that creators should not be in the management positions, and it's remained a pillar of the company's corporate culture. Sunrise, this ethos came from the fact that Osamu Tezuka, being the head creative force over at Mushi Productions, repeatedly ran into financial troubles as he was trying to juggle both the management side and the creative side of the studio. He kind of ruled over with an iron fist. And so they said these two areas should be separate so the creators can focus on creating, and then we can handle all the production and logistics sides. Therefore, a big part of Sunrise's business is to handle the production management side while outsourcing animation to other studios. Now, of course, Sunrise has a massive stable of studios for internal production. Specifically, they have studios 1 through 11. These were added through the years. Each one has a massive legacy for anime projects and famous staff who've gone on to form other studios. Given the amount of information to cover in this episode, I just picked out about a third of them. So Studio 1 is obviously the home base for Mobile Suit Gundam. They also produced Armored Trooper Votoms, Space Runway Ideon, Inuyasha. Studio 2 was the production site for Aura Battler Dunbine, Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack, and as well as Escaflowne. The founders of Studio Bones hail from Studio 2, which is how we get the co-production and animation by Studio Bones on Cowboy Bebop the movie. Studio 7 is the home for the Brave series of super robots and also the origins for many Manglobe staffers. Studio 10 also animated Outlaw Star. Additionally, we have Studio DID for CGI productions, Nerima Studio, which is formerly Sunrise Emotion, which is an in-between studio Sunrise Origin, and then Sunrise Beyond was established in 2019 from the remains of Studio Zebek, at the same address actually, it's the same building. Sunrise Art is also an animation background art production studio. So Sunrise begins in September of 1972 as Sunrise Studio Company Limited under the umbrella of Tohoku Shinsha Film, which is a major film distributor, recording studio, and production company, and under its ownership of its subsidiary Shueisha. Basically, Sunrise, they lacked the funds to start the anime company all by themselves, so the Tohoku backing was crucial in order to get the studio off the ground. And at the time, the anime television market was largely crowded with companies adapting a popular manga as well as a slew of classic children's literature. The 70s in particular were the era of the world masterpiece theater by Toei and other studios. Sunrise decided to fill a niche in the market by animating super robot shows, and these are essentially animated advertisements for toys and model kits, and these are typically seen as harder, more expensive to animate, but you make up with that cost and more through merchandising and licensing and toy sales. And Sunrise has made robot shows a key part of its business. They've produced well over 200 robot television, anime, and movies across its more than 50-year history. However, their first anime broadcast from October 1972 to March of 73 is not anything science fiction. This is Hazedon, or Chief Joker. This is a 26-episode short-form series focused on a goby fish named Hazedon, who sets off to become the strongest fish in the world as a promise to his mother. He basically travels the world on adventures with the blowfish Puyon and the mermaid Shiran. The studio's second project, however, was the sci-fi space adventure series Zero Tester, which ran for 66 episodes. This is basically meant to be Japanese Thunderbirds, as Tohoku Shinsha held the Japanese broadcast rights for the UK puppet show Thunderbirds. Sunrise also partnered with Toei to produce and animate Combattler V, which is created and directed by Tadao Nakahama, and the first of what would become known as the Super Robot Romance Trilogy. This trilogy consisted of Combattler V, Voltes 5, and then Tosho Daimos. This is a co-pro between Tokuhou Shinsha, Nippon Sunrise and the Toei Company. Sunrise also worked on Yusha Raiden, or Brave Raiden, through 1975 through 1976. But around this time, the staff was growing increasingly frustrated with Tohoku's lack of production credits. And so in November of 1976, Shueisha and Tohoku decided to exit the animation production business, and they sold Sunrise Studios back to its members through a management buyout. And so Sunrise was then rebranded to, as you heard me say before, Nippon Sunrise Incorporated. And so their logo first appeared in 1982's legendary Colossus Edeon Contact Activation. It was a motion in which a white line entered a blue circle to form the N shape. And they continued on the Super Robot trilogy again with Voltas 5 and Daimos, as well as production assistance with animated Shitaro Ishinomori's Cyborg 009 alongside Toei. Autumn 1977 was the release of their first in-house work under Nippon Sunrise name, Invincible Superman Zambot 3, from October 1977 to March of 78. It's another Super Robot anime series created by Yoshiyuki Tomino and Yoshitake Suzuki, featuring character designs by Yoshikazu Yasuhiko. And these are names that you will obviously know because, of course, in 1979, April 7th, 1979 in particular, this was the premiere of Mobile Suit Gundam, launching arguably the biggest and most consistent franchise for the studio and a real seat change for the animation industry at the time. The creation is largely credited to Yoshiyuki Tomino, who has gone on to become seen to be like a Japanese George Lucas type figure. But it really was a team of multiple writers and designers, including Yoshikazu Yasuhiko and mech designs by Kunio Okawara. And Gundam itself ran for 43 episodes on the Nagoya Broadcasting Network. 43 was a weird episode count because the series was actually canceled due to low initial ratings, but it was after broadcast where the series truly exploded in popularity, to the extent that it just changed the anime industry and kicked off what was known as the real robot subgenre of the super robot main genre. Gundam was then collected into 3 compilation theatrical films and released through 1981 through 82, with direct sequels Zeta Gundam in 1985 and Double Zeta Gundam in 1986. This introduced a new cast of characters and an evolving conflict. Gundam Double Zeta was also the last of the franchise to be released under the Nippon Sunrise name. And so other notable works for Nippon Sunrise, basically from 1980 through 1987, we have some series directed by Tomino. Again, we have Space Runway Edeon in 1980, Zabungle in 82, Our Battler Dunbine in 83 and 84, and Heavy Metal L Game in 1984 and 85. We also have Yasuhiko directed works, specifically the sci-fi action series Crusher Joe and Crusher Joe the Movie and its OVAs from 1983. He also created and directed the Giant Gorg television series in 84. He adapted his own manga series Arion to film in March of 1986. Ryosuke Takahashi directed Panzer World Galliant, and then in 1983 we have Armored Trooper Votoms, initially as an OVA series and a movie. It's had several sequels and spin-off OVAs throughout the 80s, and it continued into the 2010s. In 1985, we also have adaptations of the Dirty Pair light novels, which were written by Haruko Takachiho and illustrated by Yoshikazu Yasuhiko. So this was adapted into 26-episode TV series and several OVA entries again through the 80s and the 90s. This follows the misadventures of Special Agents Kei and Yuri, who always end up causing massive collateral damage wherever they are sent on a mission, which usually it's not their fault. Usually just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but hey, they always get the job done. This is also around the time where Sunrise began entering into the booming OVA market, the direct-to-video market, beginning in 1985, mainly to supplement their previous television outings. So again, we had Panzer World Galliant and Votom's OVAs, Crusher Joe, the Dirty Pair OVAs in 85 and 87. Heavy Metal L Game got a 3-part compilation OVA, and the final listed project under the Sunrise name, Nippon Sunrise name, was the high-speed mecha racing OVA Dead Heat, which was released in August of 1987. And so in June of 1987, Nippon Sunrise became Sunrise and adopted its now iconic blue and red joined half circles in the shape of an S, superimposed on an image of the rising sun. This is also when Sunrise began to take on more adaptation work, such as Mr. Ajiko, which was the first project released under the rebrand. We also, of course, have City Hunter, based on the popular Weekly Shonen Jump manga. It got a 10-episode OVA sequel series for the Dirty Pair, which was 1987 through April of 1988. 1988 was the release of Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack, which was the culmination of what would be known as the Universal Century timeline that began with Gundam back in 1979. So the sequel projects and spin-offs continued to be released for the Universal Century. We had Gundam F91, Victory Gundam, SD Gundam. We had some OVAs, 8th MS Team, Stardust Memories, War in the Pocket. But the overall consensus for the sequels came to be that the Universal Century at this point was running more than 10 years, and it was becoming increasingly cluttered with too many things to watch. And so as the 80s gave way to the 90s, it seemed increasingly like Gundam was struggling to find its place. But of course, we will return to that in just a few minutes. We're going to stay roughly sequential here for right now. So we're going to shift gears and talk about 1989, Yoroiden Samurai Troopers, which was an experimental show. It was a samurai Super Sentai anime created specifically by Sunrise to compete against the Weekly Shonen Jump juggernaut Saint Seiya and its massive toy line with Bandai. So Sunrise typically partnered with Bandai on the toy end, but for this time they actually partnered with Takara Tomy, which is a rival to Bandai. Samurai Troopers didn't achieve its goal of massive and commercial success, the likes of Saint Seiya. It still enjoyed a cult following and got plenty of sequel OVAs to build on the series, and is actually getting a new entry next year at the time of this recording. We also have the OVA series Space Warrior, which is adapting the classic sci-fi novel Starship Troopers. Sunrise also is credited with production assistance on Patlabor, the Mobile Police series, the TV series, and Patlabor, the New Files in 1990 through 1992. 1990 was also a big year for Sunrise in the return of more, traditional super robots with Brave X Kaiser. This is the first entry in what would become known as the Brave series of the Super Robot television series, and it's basically considered a revival of the super robot genre and launched a successful toy line and 8 television series across the main series, and it also had some sequel OVAs in the 2000s. But basically from 1990 through 1998, ending with Gao Gai Gar, the Brave series was a really big deal. And again, another feature for mech designs by Kunio Okawara. They also got a spin-off series, Better Man, in 1999 that shares the same universe as Gao Gai Gar. And through all of this, in February of 1994, Sunrise became a member under the Bandai Group, which is where this episode suddenly becomes a story of 2 companies, especially in 2005, when 3 is a crowd. So I'm going to rip through this sidebar as quickly as I can. Bandai is, of course, a massive toy company that was founded in 1947. They started off by selling toy models of cars and airplanes, and then they entered the licensing side of the industry in 1960s, beginning with Astro Boy as well as Ultraman. And they experienced rapid growth thanks to the success of the license and as well as original toys, particularly in July of 1980 when Bandai launched their now iconic line of Gundam plastic model kits, or Gunpla, constructed to scale and with increasing levels of complexity and detail, and it continues to be a major part of Sunrise and Bandai. It was a major part of why these 2 studios work so closely together. And this part of the business was reorganized into Bandai Spirits into 2018, and thanks to a multitude of factors, Bandai became one of the biggest toy manufacturers in Japan and began to make several moves to further diversify their business portfolio. And so Bandai's acquisition of Sunrise in 1994 was their entry into the animation production business, and would distribute their works through the Bandai Visual label, which is the parent company of the Emotion Video as well as the music publishing imprint. So it's the Emotion label is the logo based off the Moai statues of Easter Island. So all of that's under Bandai Visual. And in September of 2005, Bandai then merged with the multinational video game developer and also amusement facilities and entertainment company. Bandai became Bandai Namco, and they established a new holding parent company that would bring all of Bandai's toy manufacturing and anime production activities, combine it with Namco's video game publishing and developing operations under the Bandai Namco Holdings Group. And so on the anime side, we of course have the Bandai Visual Company. Again, this is the home video division of Bandai Namco Filmworks, focuses on mainly works from the Sunrise Company, plus outside licensing, because through the years, there had been multiple attempts, the late 80s and early 90s, there had been multiple attempts to bring Mobile Suit Gundam to the United States, but really wouldn't find success, largely due to, long story short, Bandai Visual just never understood fully the American market. However, they got lucky in April of 1996 with the premiere of the alternate universe series Gundam Wing, enjoying massive popularity in the United States after airing on the Toonami block in March of 2000, and remains a major part of anime fandom of that time. And so, largely thanks to the success of this and other series, Bandai Entertainment and Bandai Visual USA was established in 2005. They were based in Cypress, California, and were primarily focused on releasing titles for anime and manga from Bandai Visual Japan, while also still operating as a separate entity. They also did deluxe editions, mainly as manga releases, some American graphic novels. Their first home video release was Royal Space Force: The Wings of Oniyamis, which was one of their boutique labels. Oniyamis was one of their labels, but they were met with heavy resistance over basically the ridiculous pricing schemes. They tried to copy and paste the Japanese pricing scheme and limited editions and all these other market strategies that Japanese fans were used to, but over in North America, we just basically saw it as highway robbery. And so Bandai Visual and Bandai Entertainment were liquidated in 2008, with the final wind down coming during 2012, and a final for real closure in March of 2013, and which is when we had the massive pickup of various Bandai Visual properties by Funimation, Crunchyroll, Discotek, Sentai, you name it, they were working through it. At 2014's New York Comic Con, Sunrise then announced that it was partnering with Right Stuf Incorporated to release the Gundam franchise in North America, including the first ever release of Turn A Gundam. And so basically, Right Stuf released Gundam under its Nozomi Entertainment label for a number of years until Right Stuf was acquired by Crunchyroll in 2022. And although Crunchyroll promised it would leave the Nozomi brand alone, it practically abandoned the label and, by extension, Gundam in the USA. So it's just been burning through its back stock ever since 2022. And so in February 2025, we have a new subsidiary that was formed, Bandai Namco Filmworks America. And their goal is to resume international licensing and distribution. They're also trying to get ahead of the plan, live-action co-production film with, they're doing a live-action Gundam film with Legendary Pictures. So we should expect to see more movement on this front going into 2026. And so I already mentioned Gundam Wing. We're jumping back to April of 1994 with getting back on track with the anime releases. And so April of 1994 saw the release of Mobile Fighter G Gundam, kicking off the alternate universe entries into the Gundam franchise, basically having nothing to do with the Universal Century. These are all standalone series, can be enjoyed by themselves, but of course everything makes their tribute back to Universal Century Gundam. So April of 1996 was Gundam Wing, and then we, of course, have After War Gundam X, we have Gundam Seed, IBO, Witch, and all of those. So they're still producing side stories within the Universal Centuries. So 1996 through 1999, you had the OVA series, 12 episodes actually, of Mobile Suit Gundam, the 8th MS Team, which is described as basically Gundam meets Vietnam. Also in April of 1996, we had the steampunk fantasy robot anime, The Vision of Escaflowne, which again was more popular in the States than in Japan, despite the rushed ending due to episode count being cut mid-production. Escaflowne, the movie, was later released in 2000 as a sort of alternate retelling of the series. And in October of 1996 is when we have the final update to the Sunrise logo. Now, that wasn't really a major design change. It was more like updating the existing logo to prevent flickering on television screens, on CRT screens, and the scan lines. And so, of course, going into the turn of the millennia, I'm going to talk about 1998. This was a big year for the studio on the originals front with Cowboy Bebop and Outlaw Star, as well as a compilation movie for Gundam 8th MS Team. You also had the Gundam Wing Endless Waltz later, also the infamous Brain Power directed by Tomino. 1999 saw the fusion of super robots and Japanese tokusatsu with Batman/film noir. This is, of course, the Big O. Originally released as a single 13-episode series, this was, once again, not very popular in Japan, but very well beloved in the United States. And so the creators left episode 13 as a cliffhanger, prompting U.S. fans to demand Cartoon Network for more, which we got in 2003, specifically thanks to Cartoon Network financing that second season. And so autumn 1999 through March 2000 was the premiere of Infinite Ryuvis, which also marked the beginning of Goro Taniguchi's directorial career at Sunrise. He's most known for developing and directing Code Geass, Lelouch of the Rebellion, featuring the charismatic Lelouch on his quest for revenge against the imperialistic Empire of Britannia. He mobilizes a grassroots resistance in Japan, but Lelouch employs cunning strategy and powerful psychic abilities in order to gain the upper hand against a vastly superior armed force, while also hiding his identity from his own army, since he is also of Britannian nobility. Code Geass premiered in 2006 and continues to this day with sequels, side stories, and alternate timeline movies. Other projects during this time include 2000 with Brigadoon and Gear Fighter Dendo. 2001 was another sci-fi action series, S-Cried. Also production management for Cowboy Bebop the movie. Again, that was animated by Bones. 2002 was Witch Hunter Robin. 2000 also saw the release of the very popular adaptation of Rumiko Takahashi's manga Inuyasha, and this aired all through 2004 with multiple side stories and sequel films throughout, also concluding with Inuyasha the Final Act TV series in fall of 2009, ending in March of 2010. And then about a decade later, we got Yashahime Princess Half Demon, premiered in October of 2020 as the direct sequel, also spin-off to Inuyasha. And so once again, on the Gundam front, going into the 2000s, following the massive successes of Gundam Wing and Endless Waltz, we had the less well-received After-War Gundam X and Turn A Gundam. But the AU's fortunes turned around in 2002 with Mobile Suit Gundam Seed, directed by Mitsuo Fukuda of Shinseki GPX Cyber Formula. Also, he directed Gear Fighter Dando. Gundam Seed was insanely popular in Japan and over here. It remains as one of the most popular entries in the franchise next to the original series. Seed Destiny was the direct sequel in 2004 alongside several side stories across the later 2000s. And then we got a sequel movie just recently last year in 2024, Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Freedom. Other adaptations include Planetes in 2003. This is adapting the Space Janitor Workplace Dramedy, the manga by Vinland Saga's Makoto Yukimura, also directed by Goro Taniguchi. So he did, again, S-Cried, Infinite Ryuvis, Code Geass. We also have My Hime, Yakitate Japan, Gintama, big deal from 2006 through the 2010s, Sergeant Frog from 2004 to 2011, and adapting Reki Kawahara's Axel World in 2012, as well as its sequels. We also have the partnership with director Katsuhiro Otomo of Akira. They produced Steam Boy in 2004, as well as the anthology movie Short Piece in 2012. Getting into more Bandai Namco territory, we have Scarlet Nexus in 2021, based on the video game, as well as 2023's Sandland, the movie and web series, which was a co-production with Studio Anima and Kamikaze Doga, based on the property and manga by Akira Toriyama, and again, the video game published by Bandai Namco. And going through the 2010s through current day, these are mostly original works. We have Tiger and Bunny. They did an original superhero project in 2011. The idea being superheroes have corporate sponsors, complete with logos and everything. And these were like real world corporate logos. They brought in actual companies and said, hey, would you like to sponsor a hero? And they also got a spin-off sequel series, a double-decker, Doug and Krill, released in 2018. Another major work for Sunrise is, of course, Love Live! School Idol Project, which is a multimedia idol series, music series, beginning in 2013, alongside their rhythm game by Bushi Road. This has gone on for well over a decade, still getting new entries, and it has basically a rotating cast as characters graduate and move on, and then they bring in a new cast. Continues to be a very popular initiative. Again, several ongoing deals. And another multimedia project is Aikatsu Stars, based on a line of Bandai arcade machines, beginning in 2012 and also ongoing, with a film, I believe, coming out in 2025. We also have another spin-off Gundam series, which is 2013, beginning with Gundam Build Fighters, and then we have like Build Divers, Metaverse. And this show is very blatantly reaching out more to a younger audience. Hey kids, would you like to build Gunpla? This is a world where characters assemble like actual plastic Gundam model kits and then throw them in, duke it out in the arena. You know, Car Fight Vanguard, Yu-Gi-Oh style, Bakugan Battle Brawlers, Beyblade, that sort of deal. And it's had several entries and games as well, specifically in the Build series. So you have Universal Century, AU Gundam, and then typically the more casual Build series, which also will have nods and deep cuts for the existing Gundam fans. And then backing up to March 2010, after a long time away, the Universal Century returned in force off the back of Gundam Unicorn, which was a 7-part OVA series that began in March of 2010 and wrapped in 2014. And the success of this basically kicked off a new wave of Universal Century stories for new fans. And Unicorn was so successful that Sunrise later announced an initiative, and they unveiled a roadmap for more entries in the Universal Century timeline called UC The Next 100, basically the next 100 years of Universal Century, and that initiative has been running for about a decade and change. So far in UC Next 100, this includes Gundam Narrative, Reconquista in G, plus the G-Reco compilation films that are still coming out. Also, Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway, its first movie, and it's also getting a second movie in 2026. We also have the prequel series, Advent of the Red Comet, which is basically adapting the prequel portion leading up to the events of Episode 1 of Gundam 79, but ostensibly it's adapting the manga by Yasuhiko. And this also was, he also got to direct the side story film, Kukuru's Dawn's Island. And this is a movie that he directed to make up for what was considered a lost episode of Gundam 79 that was cut by Tomino during the original airtime. And so again, both Comet and Island are directed by Yasuhiko-san. Additionally, in 2024 was the 3D web series Gundam Requiem for Vengeance. This is basically 8th MS team, but now we're following Zeon soldiers as they're being hunted by a prototype Gundam that's picking them all off Predator style. This year was also the release of Gundam G-Quux. Very interesting to type that one out. And this was a co-production with Hideaki Anno's Studio Kara. Perhaps best described as a what-if series. It technically falls into an alternate universe timeline, but pulls extensively and requires a basic and actually rather extensive knowledge of the Universal Century. So it's an interesting little in-between series. Some major AU series during this time, of course, include the very popular Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans in 2015, and then The Witch from Mercury in 2020's Gundam IBO recently celebrated 10 years since its broadcast this year. And so on April 1st, 2022, Bandai Namco Holdings announced an organizational restructure which resulted in Sunrise being folded into the Visual Arts division of Bandai Namco Arts, along with the usual cascade of reorgs across the company. So as it stands today, Bandai Namco Filmworks is essentially a combined unit of the visual business units of Bandai Namco Arts, their rights marketing areas, and Studio Sunrise. They still handle production management for anime such as Blue Lock, Classroom for Heroes, Ruby Ice Queendom, Yurei Dekos. So again, these are anime that the actual animation work was performed by other studios, but Sunrise handled the logistics side. And then, of course, we have further Bandai Namco IP, obviously the continued success of Love Live and its other spin-off series, as well as the original idol anime Maibashi Witches. Current and upcoming projects include My Status as an Assassin Obviously Exceeds the Hero. That's a isekai anime currently airing in the fall 2025 season. And for 2026 and beyond, of course, in January, we have new Samurai Troopers. We have another adaptation of Rumiko Takahashi's manga. It's a dark fantasy Mao. We also have a Studio Pierrot co-production, Magical Sisters Lulutot Lily, as well as the second movie for Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway, releasing in theaters in 2026. And that concludes our studio rundown for Sunrise. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you on the next one.